We're going to have a roundtable discussion with a number of people, and Nancy Cotterill, my wife, is the co-founder. She's been my partner in life and marriage and parenting and grandparenting now in business and ministry for 47 years. So, Nancy Cotterill.
Thank you. Let me see if, does that work? Okay, great. Just to give you a little background, when Jim was sharing his plans for Unite Indy with Darrell Webster, who pastors Emmanuel Missionary Baptist Church at 30th and Sherman, Pastor Darrell said to him, "You know, Jim, you can plan and discuss this forever, but while you guys are talking about this in your gated communities up north, we've got houses on fire here." He was, of course, referring to the terrible conditions present in our poorest neighborhoods. But it's important to note that although most poor people are white and not black, Indianapolis has an inner city that is primarily black. Also, where middle-class blacks and whites often have close relationships because they share many cultural attributes, there remains a double culture shock between the black person who lives in poverty and the middle-class white volunteer. So how do we build race relationships? I think the first step is to understand the problems. I look at what is working, and then we can together reach an idea of what we can do to help. To that end, we're especially honored to introduce this panel of leaders who operate in the trenches every day. So panelists, if you'll take your places as I call your name, and we'll ask the audience to hold any applause until after they're seated. Beginning, let's see, we're going to go the other way. To my left is Commander Phillip Burton, who's the downtown commander of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Force. He is a law enforcement veteran of 27 years. He's worked as the assistant commander of the Homeland Security Bureau, and he's also a mentor and a motivational speaker for youth and young men. To his left is Toby Miller, who is president of the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee's Race and Cultural Relations Leadership Network, which fosters positive relationships among diverse groups and responds to crisis issues relating to those groups. On his left would be Cindy Palmer. She is the co-founder of Kaleo, a women's ministry, and founder of Heart Change Ministries that serves, trains, and employs mothers in crisis. And she is also founder of Covenant Community Housing that provides housing for them in the Brookside community. To her left is David Hampton, and I haven't said, there he is. Hi, David. Pastor of Light of the World Christian Church and Deputy Mayor of Indianapolis in the area of neighborhood engagement. And then to his left is Dr. Charles Ware, president of Crossroads Bible College and author of the book One Race, One Blood. Dr. Ware is a nationally known speaker and consultant on racial reconciliation and leadership. Please welcome our panelists. We're going to let Jim come here too, so you get to have a chair. So let's begin. This is a little different than most panel discussions you've heard. We're not going to ask one person a question and make it a long speech. We hope to have a lot of give and take, so that's what you'll hear tonight. To begin, my first question is for David. 50 years ago, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, then with the Department of Labor, warned that the collapse of the black family was making neighborhoods poorer and more violent. At the time, 25% of African American babies were born to single mothers. Today, the number is 71%. I have heard you express your concern over this issue. Besides the fact that these families are inherently less stable financially, what are you concerned about?
Well, I've mentioned in a number of settings the concern over that number you just mentioned. In the 1950s, fatherless homes were at 25%. Today, they're upwards of 70%. And I think the dynamics are varied, Just the most obvious dynamic is anytime there's a breakdown in the family structure in terms of a father not being in the home, statistics can tell you, certainly better than me, some of the adverse effects on children, regardless of race, when a father is not present, when a mother is not present, either parent. But when we talk about fatherless homes in the 70% range, a number of issues arise, and our IMPD can tell you that one of the contributing factors to juvenile delinquency is the lack of parenting. And many of our young males need positive male role models. Some of them are each other's role models. And so, and I would even go so far as to say we see a rise now in teen gun violence. Almost every day we hear of another shooting or aggravated assault among teens. It used to be that teens looked to gangs for the type of support they may have lacked by way of a positive father figure. Today, I think we've moved from gangs to guns because we live in such an individualized society. A gang is not as important to join. If I can get a gun, then I can protect myself. And that has some very negative effects that reverberate across our community, obviously, as we see. But I'll also go so far as to say one of the things we may overlook in terms of African-American fatherless homes is the issue of mass incarceration in the prison industrial complex.
And we'll get there.
Absolutely.
And we'll get
so
there.
many fathers are not present because of some of the racial disparities, and I'm sure we can talk about that.
Yeah, we will.
They are arrested and incarcerated where some of their white counterparts are not, and at a much higher rate. And so it's not just that fathers are not being fathers. Some cannot be fathers because they're incarcerated. And that's an entirely different type of the dynamic that we can talk about.
Okay. Cindy, can I ask you a question? You deal with single moms in your ministries every day. How hard is it for them, without the support of a spouse, both in an emotional and a financial way?
Well, extremely difficult. Single parenting is a relentless.
Are you
proposition.
into your, make sure you're talking into it.
Can you hear?
That's better.
Is it on? Okay. Well, of course, anybody who's a single parent knows it's extremely difficult. But the moms that I'm working with and that I'm spending time with, my friends, they wanted a father in their lives. And when the father's not there, the protection that God ordained for fathers, for children, is gone, which leaves them vulnerable to boyfriends in the home and men who will take advantage of them. It leaves them in a place where they're surrounded by a world of men who haven't been raised by fathers. And so what I hear all the time is the men don't know how to be men. And they want men who know how to be men.
Does anybody have a thought about what that looks like, Dr. Ware?
Well, you know what? I grew up without a father, and the male figure in my life when I was in elementary school, he and my mom was never married. They separated, and then I was up north, and my mom married. And my senior year in high school, the father figure in my younger life came up, took me out fishing, and wanted to know what I thought about he and my mom getting together. And I was 18, so I knew she was married, so I'm like, well, that's between you and my mom. Long story short, he came back to the house one night, and my stepfather shot and killed him. That kind of shattered my hopes at that particular time. And there are a lot of images. What is success? What is manhood? What is fatherhood? And when you're in these environments, that's shattered unless someone else comes into your life. And I was fortunate enough to have a coach come into my life, and then Christ came into my life and changed everything. But without those role models and that influences, you have a lot to struggle with.
What about those guns and gangs we're talking about? Phil, can you talk to us about that?
Well, unfortunately, we do have some gangs. They're not super prevalent in Indianapolis, but we do have a lot of violence that can be attributed to guns. So one of the things that the chief is trying to do with a lot of his initiatives is to lower the rate of our non-violent, or rather non-fatal shootings. Unfortunately, we had a large amount of homicides last year, and you can attribute the homicides to the non-fatal shootings, and that is just bullet placement. So unfortunately, there could have been more.
So it was meant to be fatal shootings?
Could have
Probably.
been.
Yeah.
Could have been. Sometimes they like to send signals that if you don't pay up, the next time it will. So, but it's just unfortunate, but we try to do a lot. What we do encourage people is if in fact you do have someone that either is a victim of a shooting, that you let us know and that you cooperate. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of victims that are not cooperative, and that is very difficult for the police department.
So you feel that the gang groups are being reduced in Indianapolis?
Yes.
They are?
Yes.
Don't they
And
still
pretty much
exist?
what Dr. Hampton said, it's going from gangs to guns. Unfortunately, we have a lot of guns that are on the street, obviously illegal. You know, everyone has a right to a gun, and we want them to do it legally. But for those that have guns from an illegal capacity is what we're seeing, and that is contributing to a lot of our teen violence, unfortunately.
Toby, you've been sent in to foster positive relationships with difficult, even dangerous atmospheres at times. What is your feeling about the health of the young male black community in the inner city?
Yeah, no softballs here at all, huh? Well, I do get dispatched to try to create we are the world situations, where everybody kind of sings kumbaya. Dogs and cats get together and like, hey, we're family. Unfortunately, it's, you know, doing race relations and the kind of work that I do, I'll spin this around a little bit. The work that I do is kind of like making sausage. You don't really want to see that process, because you're not going to really want to eat it. But when you do get to it, it works out well. So the way I've approached it, and I think the way we kind of have to look at least for me, how we approach some of these issues in terms of challenges that both black men and white men are facing, is take away the positional debate. So get away from I'm black, you're white, and really get into interest-oriented discussions. What are you interested in? Because when you ultimately break things down like that, the skin color becomes less of a barrier. And then you can start finding out there's ways to develop real partnerships. And partnership doesn't always require that we're, you know, we share the same bed, you know, you're my neighbor, we both eat the same foods. I mean, it doesn't require all that. It requires that I am going to function in a way that supports and advances your interests. So when we find ourselves as a community, and I would venture to say our community is suffering from a culture, a tradition of violence that we don't always recognize. We think it's just bullets, and that's important too. But think about how psychically damaging, how the violence that occurs when people don't know how to be a meaningful, active, and necessary individual. I would say that's the man. If a man doesn't know how to be meaningful, active, and necessary, he's never seen that. That's not part of his conscience, part of his way of living. That's a violent situation in that body. But if you say, what are you really interested in? I submit that most people, when given a chance to find that ground, they'll present that. And it's not, again, that's that sausage process. It's not pretty to get there. And I'm glad we're in church. Pastor kind of rescued me on this. If we can all kind of be like Paul and not be afraid to be shipwrecked. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when you walk into a situation, you're dealing with somebody who's completely different. You're in a situation where you're about to get shipwrecked if you do the wrong thing. But if you're not afraid of that, and then you come in on that broken piece of wood, and the first thing you do is start making a fire. that I think you change some of the paradigms. Some of the folks in the community that I deal with, they really don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And the moment you start building fires, because everybody's cold, I'm interested in being warm. I'm a little round, so I keep my insulation with me. But the moment you start doing some of that, you start changing the atmosphere. I'm sure the pastors start saying amen with some of that, changing the atmosphere. And then the final thing is you have to take the risk, because the moment you start building that fire, what happens? A viper will come out and bite you, and black people will look at you and say you're wrong, or white people will look at you and say you're one of them, or you have a whole bunch of people who are saying you're the other lover, or how evil you are, or how bad you must be. And I think we all have to have that character to quickly shake that off and get right back into the business of finding common interests, finding the room to give people the opportunity to be the man, meaningful, active, and necessary, and not just in their lives, but in your life too. If you allow yourself to have that room to take that risk, to be like Paul, I submit we have an opportunity to change the atmosphere and ultimately change some of the violence.
One of the things that Bible verses that has pressed Jim and I on in this effort has been Paul's statement that he is not looking back, that he presses forward into the future. And I think that often in any kind of endeavor that involves getting involved with people who you're not just like, you can spend every minute rehashing every bad thing that's ever happened, and that gets you absolutely nowhere. And we believe that if going forth with love is the only way to process anything, and certainly understanding the differences is important, but love is the most important thing. So I've got a question for you. Phil, I'm working with some women who live in poverty in the inner city, and one of them has 3 children with 2 different dads. Both of the dads now are incarcerated with life sentences. Although she works, she doesn't have very much money, and she did have some income from the former father, but she's been evicted along with her children, and meanwhile her 8-year-old, the oldest one, is already showing signs of hypermasculinity and is very difficult for her to control. What do we do with this little boy who's 8 years old? How do we save him?
I think it's been mentioned about positive male role models. And one of the agencies that I work with, I actually mentor one of the programs for the Center for Leadership Development. And one of the programs that I help mentor, and I've done that for well over 15 years, is Project Mr., and Mr. stands for Male Responsibility. So we teach these young men in grades 7 through 10 all about first respecting themselves, respecting women, respecting others, and we take them through a whole litany of things that they need to learn to be productive individuals. So if we can get this young man in some type of program, and not only him, I don't know if he's got other brothers, but any of his siblings, in these type of mentoring programs, so that he can have that positive male figure in his life. I think that would really start helping him now, and we need to do this as young as possible. And from a church standpoint, I would mention the church as well, so we can get him into someone's church, into Sunday school. I was a Sunday school teacher, but I told my pastor that's not my spiritual gift, so. But no, really to get him into some type of mentoring program as early as we can, I think that would really help him.
Can I throw something in here?
Please
on
do.
that? Yes. I also would challenge us all to look at all the kids from an asset perspective versus a liability. I've heard a whole bunch. We all know the cliches. Well, you have to identify the problem. And I wax back to over 100 years ago with Du Bois, when people ask, how does it feel to be a problem? How would we feel about people looking at us and immediately seeing problems and then requiring us to own our problems first? How many of you would feel like that's a game I want to keep playing? If we approach these young people and our situations from an asset orientation, I submit we bring positive energy to that whole situation. And sometimes I get concerned when we see kids. You guys can have mine if you'd like, but you see kids and say, there's a problem, or that child's got a problem, or their situation was terrible, that's the problem. And when we look at them like that, that's the glass we put on. That's the frames we put on. And that's the only thing we see. And then we say, if they overcome the problem, they're successful.
And the frames they put on.
Yes,
I'm a problem.
If we change that, and I'll end with this, I hopefully do, will. I was interacting with a summer camp of young kids, and they were excited. They want to kind of give me their motto and their tradition, their chants, and they were saying, how wonderful this camp was, and then they said, we may be black, but we can be successful. Now, did you hear that? We may be black, but we can be successful. As if that blackness is a liability, something to overcome. They're ingesting this negative energy so early in life. I said, no. You have to change that paradigm for yourselves. I submit we have to do that as a community, not look at, those poor people. Because I guarantee one of them was Christ. And we drove right by saying that poor person. So if we can change our own mindset around some of these things that we're dealing with as a community and look for the opportunity to create asset orientation, I submit even the way we approach it,
That's excellent.
I think would
That's
be
an excellent idea.
Have better outcomes.
And David, I heard you speak at the Faith in Action event the other day. You were really wonderful, and you hit on a lot of good points.
Thank you very much.
And one of the things I read and I thought of you, it was according to U.S. Labor Department, young blacks have the highest rate of unemployment. The report said that poorly prepared black and Hispanic young people are being pushed off the bottom rung of the economic ladder. And it actually, I didn't write it down, but it actually said, by whites who are being pushed down the rungs of the economic ladder. As a city, we know unemployment can lead to crime. And as Toby was saying, we need to have positive role models and maps for young people who have not had those before. They haven't seen mom and dad go to work. And they don't really understand the economic viability of that for their futures. So what are we doing? And I think I know the answer to this, but I'd love to hear it from you for everyone's benefit. What are we doing in Indianapolis to help kids get jobs who want jobs?
Thanks for letting me brag on the mayor's office in the city of Indianapolis. I'm just very elated and proud to say that one of the mayor's initiatives is called Project Indy, and you can certainly look up the link, projectindy.net. Last year, the mayor's goal was to hire offer 1,000 jobs to teens. We met that goal. This year, we've doubled it. For 2017, it's 2,000 jobs. But here's the good news. We already have 2,500 commitments from employers. So those jobs are waiting, and we're very optimistic that we can fill those positions. But I think you hit on something that is key for all of our young people, white or black. We have to ensure that they are job ready. And so what's lacking oftentimes are those soft skills and those social skills, how to look somebody in the eye, how to shake a hand, how to wear a suit, dress, or tie, how to get to work on time, a resume building. Those types of things are more social in nature, and if they don't have someone in the home, it requires us, the community or our churches, to help them with some of those soft skills. So it's not, the real issue is not job availability, it's job readiness. Because, the same dynamic applies to a young person trying to get a job as it does to a re-entrant, a citizen returning from prison looking for a job. If you've been in prison for 30 years and you're just released, and all of a sudden you're asked to go to a job, you haven't been acclimated to that a job mentality. Or even, let's say, a pro athlete who comes right out of college, hasn't managed $5, and then signs a $5 million contract. If you can't manage 5, how are you going to manage 5 million? And we see even those statistics, even pro athletes, when they stop playing, some of the highest incidences of bankruptcy because they're poor money managers, because they didn't learn those soft skills. So it's really not a job or a money problem, it's a social.
So are you training those soft skills? Are you giving them those soft skills?
Well, you know, we're trying to provide the jobs first. That's the primary goal. But we are partnering with many organizations that want to do that. But no, we actually are not. That's the next step.
I will say, as I mentioned, the Center for Leadership Development. And
Yeah,
the
they
mentoring
do that.
program, they're doing an excellent job in actually teaching our young men those soft skills. We do exactly that. And they do an excellent job. They have several different programs that actually offer those type of skill sets.
Right.
But you know, that's not just a problem for our youth, it's a problem for the women in our city who have become moms as high schoolers or middle schoolers, and now they find themselves needing to provide for their family. And not only do they not have the education, but they don't have those skills. They can get a job, but they can't keep it. And that's where those skills are so necessary, and something that we found lots of people who are willing to give jobs. They want to hire people, but they need the skills to show up to work on time, to show up consistently, to be able to deal with corrective, constructive criticism on the job, to be able to avoid drama on the job, and those kinds of things. And so it's pretty systemic.
So, talk a little louder, would you?
It's pretty systemic when you can't, when you have been in an environment where it's the ravages of generational poverty and you've just not seen those skills modeled. It's not a desire to be a bad employee, it's just you don't have it in your toolkit.
Well, speaking of toolkits, could you talk a little bit about what you do in your two really important charities and how you develop women in crisis into great mothers and homeowners and who are working?
Well, we're trying. So I work with women in generational poverty in our city and their preschoolers and their kids, and we've learned so much over the years, but we all need relationships, everyone. It's not just, you know, really this isn't a skin problem, it's a sin problem. And the ravages of generational poverty, the breakdown of God's design for identity, for family, for structure, those things have been a terrible plague of locusts. And so the women that I'm working with, yes, it's really about relationship and giving everyone positive role models and people who care and who are willing to do walk alongside. You know, we're all designed and we are all image bearers. That's how we have to see each other. We are all created in God's image. And God has given so much. He's built into everyone in our city so many skills, so many talents, but they need to be called forth. And like you were saying, you know, if you grow up hearing you're a problem, or you grow up hearing you'll never amount to anything, you'll grow up believing the lies that because of your skin color you'll never have certain opportunities. We have to replace that with calling forth the skills and the talents and seeing each other as, in our case, woman to woman. And it's been such a privilege because, yes, it's more than just getting a job. And so we start with helping women understand the one who designed them, the one who created them. Who were they created to be? What was their original design? And then what was the life that the Creator intended them to live? And when they catch a glimpse of that, it's so beautiful. And they're so awed by how beautiful it is. But then it's a long walk. We say this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Because when everything in your toolkit is what you grew up with in generational poverty, every single one of those has to be replaced with what will really lead to life and to sustaining work and to doing the hard work of parenting. You know, no one wants to be a bad mom. You just do what you know to do. And what you know to do is what was done to you. And so we walk alongside and teach what God's word says about get a vision for being a mother, get a vision for being the head of your household, get a vision for what it means to be a member of your community, get a vision for loving your neighbor. So that's what we do.
And Cindy has moved from that north side. You didn't live in a gated community either, but you did move from Carmel to Brookside to live with these neighbors that you love now. And your husband told me that he thinks you live on the happiest street in Brookside.
In the city, in the country.
In the
maybe.
whole city.
Yeah. Love
Okay.
it.
My question is for Charles, as an educator and a pastor, of course. But does it bother you that 11 of our IPS schools have received a grade of F, and it most affects black children who are living in the inner city?
Yeah, it definitely affects me. I have a son who's in Memphis, and he's actually the administrator of 5 failing schools. And some of the things we're talking about, I love it that he's picked it up. He comes in their schools, and first he had a charter school, and he says, he greets all the students, shakes their hands when he was a principal, and how are my Veritas scholars doing today? And they put in their classrooms a college. Every classroom had a college. Put it in these young kids' mind, you going to college. And he holds to the point that parents want to do a better job. Some of them just can't get out because of work or this or that. And so he goes to their home and talk to them and doing a great job. And so as I think of IPS and what we can do, I like giving positive images. When my parents was migrant workers and I was in 7th grade, a black male, didn't think I could do anything. There was a white teacher who called me her all-American boy. I went from an F to carrying an average of 99 in her class. She just inspired me for some reason. And so I think this idea of inspiring, and one of the things we like training people going to pastor in inner city ministry is a church is a community that can come around people and give them family. And that I got on Facebook, and a young lady, I pastored in Scranton, Pennsylvania for a number of years. My wife taught girls there in Sunday school, and she frankly thought she hadn't done anything. This one lady that had 11 kids, none of them had the same father. And by the way, she was white, but she was coming out of church. But this girl found me on Facebook, and she said, "Are you Pastor Ware from Scranton?" I said, "Yeah." "Oh, tell Miss Sharon I got saved. My husband is saved. We go to church now." Their whole life transformed in one generation. And so, we have to come in and pull out, as they said, pull out a vision of how God has made people, and that they can,
Do you
they
think
can
that's
make
happening
it.
in this city?
Pardon?
Do you think that's happening in this city?
I think some places it is, but we need a lot more of it. I mean, I do give credit. You got Pastor Hampton here. You got like these 6 hot spots. I know we've got alumni, graduates just about in all of them. And I know many of them are working, one right on 42nd and Post. I know they've got about 6 to 10 men who have agreed to volunteer for 3 years to mentor in School 105 behind them. And some of those things are going on, but we need a lot more of it.
So they're focusing right on that problem.
Yes.
Okay, so in that same vein, I've read that the number of children who cannot read at grade level in 3rd grade is used as an indicator of future prison space needs. I also know that teachers are not miracle workers. The kids need equal parts mentoring in the home and teaching in the schoolroom. So how does this affect you? I know that a new jail is being built, and that part of it is not just jail room, it's mental institution.
So your question to me is?
Well, my question is to you, how does that make you feel that we've got schools that are underperforming? You're a policeman in this town, and you know that almost they're being cycled into your path.
Well, what I will say is, and I don't want to, lump everyone in a box, because that's what I'm trying to stop the media from doing is saying that all juveniles are bad.
Right.
Because they're not. And I see a lot of juveniles that come downtown on Saturday, and unfortunately, one or two may become disruptive, but that doesn't mean that all of them are. So for
Somebody is.
So for those to not have, I think that the schools are given all the necessary tools. I think a lot of the parents, the younger parents, we have a lot of parents that are extremely young and that have had babies. So they're not mature enough, in my judgment, and they're not helping their kids read. They're not doing the things to help what they need to do while they're away from school. So I don't think that is a recipe for someone immediately going to jail. It's unfortunate that some may end up there, but I don't think that's actually saying that because they can't do that, they're automatically going to go that route. So I don't want to paint that kind of picture either. So, but it is unfortunate. I think that more needs to be done in terms of educating those young parents to let them know that you need to do more with your kids at this early age so that they don't become in the system, and I don't see them at such an early age. So it doesn't make me feel good, to answer your question. I don't like having to arrest or I have one of my officers here to arrest anybody, particularly our youth. I'd rather get them the help that they need, whether it's some wraparound services from mental health issues or whatever it is. And that's one of the things that we have a unit that is designed just for that, from our homeless and panhandling and all of that kind of stuff. And we try to bridge that gap while they're young as well.
And what is the police department doing that maybe is different than the way they used to operate? Outside of the box, I've heard of things like, it used to be if there was trouble in a community, you'd go in and you'd talk to the neighbors, but now you're talking to the neighbors before there's trouble in the community.
We are, and unfortunately, if some of our juveniles that do come downtown, one of the things that Chief Roach and Chief Connett, who's my immediate boss, one of the things that they're doing now is, if in fact we do arrest someone downtown, oftentimes we know that they don't live downtown. So what we do is we have our detectives do a follow-up, and we let the district commanders know where these people are living. So then we will go out to the homes and we talk to the parents and let them know that, hey, your child was arrested, this is what they were arrested for. And then we also go to the schools to let them know as well, to see if there's any type of behavioral issues or problems that they may have. Because more often than not, we know there's a little peer pressure that goes on as well. One of the young ladies that was just arrested 3 weeks ago, when my detective went over there, she was as cordial and as polite as you can be. And he was wondering, how did you get arrested? So it was really just a thing from someone said something, and then the girls in her ear are saying, don't let her say that. So now she's getting caught up in the peer pressure. So those are the things that we're dealing with as well. So we're actually trying to follow up as opposed to just arresting and leaving them there.
And able to come around someone who might be a troubled child with the
Exactly.
parents and the family. What about the issue of drugs right now? You were talking, David, about this in your talk the other day, that there is a heroin problem
There's
in
no
the
drug
United
problems
States.
in Indianapolis.
There are no drug problems. Well, that's good to hear.
That would be nice.
That would be good to hear. But David, talk a little bit about that.
I'm sure Officer Phil can talk even more eloquently than I could, but yesterday at the Faith in Action symposium, I mentioned that heroin arguably could be the new crack epidemic of today. What crack was in the 80s is what heroin is today. It's cheaper and more potent right now, and to the point that IMPD, I think you all are the prototype for the country, right, carries Narcan. We've been able to save many lives in the city, those who have overdosed, and an officer can go and administer Narcan and save a life. But we're seeing an epidemic nationwide. But because Indianapolis is the crossroads, this is a haven for drug trafficking.
So how many cases of this are you seeing?
Well, unfortunately, one is one too many. So, I mean, we have had, I don't have the exact numbers, but we have had officers that have administered the Narcan. So we have saved lives. But in addition to doing that, once we do that, then they will be taken to the hospital, and then the follow-up will come where we will try to get them the mental health resources that they need to try to see if there are some underlying issues that's causing them, obviously, to do these drugs, and try to get them off the drugs and then get them into some facilities that they need.
Well, the facility's going to be the new jail, right? Can you discuss that a little bit, what's happening there?
Sure, it's a work in progress, but the plans for the mayor's criminal justice reform is such that as we think about building a new facility, a component of that will be a mental health diversion facility as well. So that way we don't continue to incarcerate individuals who are mentally ill, which is the case currently. 40% of our jails are filled with those who are mentally ill. 85% are mentally ill / drug addicted. And so we want to have a treatment facility on site that we can actually free up more beds for more violent offenders and those who really do deserve to be there. Those who are mentally ill need treatment, not incarceration.
So how many crimes, what's the percentage of crimes, would you say, if you had to just take a wild guess, are committed by people who are actually a mental health issue and not a violent criminal?
Wow, that would be difficult without actually seeing the numbers. I wouldn't want to say 30% and it's actually 50%, or say 70 and it's actually 20. So it's really kind of difficult, but it is definitely more than 10%. So it's not quite half. So I'd give it probably 30, 35%.
That's a lot of mentally ill people on the street, though,
yes.
Isn't it?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So what about, okay, so we've talked about single parent households, generally the mother. What about the problem with unemployment? We don't have enough unemployment. We don't have enough employment in or near the inner city. People don't have the transportation to get to a factory or a venue that is miles away. To get there for an interview is one thing, but to get there every day for work is quite something else. What's happening on that ground? I know that Cindy's husband, you could talk a little bit about what David does.
Well, I mean, what he's doing is really working with men who are unemployable because of criminal background or whatever, and giving them an opportunity. Sorry, giving them an opportunity to develop skills and earn a living wage.
Now, these were formerly incarcerated people, generally?
Most of them, or had really destroyed their lives with drugs and their families
drugs.
with drugs.
And they started making furniture out of donated pallet wood. And the name of it is?
Purposeful Design.
Purposeful Design. And now they've graduated and they're making all this live edge furniture, and it's really cool. But that's just one company. And we need more companies near downtown.
Yeah, that is a good illustration of working together. You know, people need to come together. We had a student here once who had a felony, and because of a felony, he couldn't get a job. And he came to me once almost in tears, and he says, what am I supposed to do? I apply for a job, they say I got a felony, I don't have it, so I'm going to sell drugs again. But one of the good things, there was another student here who had his own business, and he took that student and he hired him, and he became a masonry, bricklayer, and ultimately got into a union. But this idea of bringing people together of different resources and provide something like that's, I think, ultimately our answers will be comprehensive, not single. It'll be a group dynamic coming together to address some of these issues.
Well, I think churches are a huge part of it. And I don't think that churches are alone in this. I think they need to join with whatever government is running our city. I don't think in my recent memory that we've ever had an administration that didn't care at some level about making changes for people who were in poverty. And so I think that can always be a part of it. I think that we have to have a vision, like you talked about, giving a vision, a proper vision to children. Our vision for the city needs to change. It needs to change into one where we see our city as that bright, shining light on a hill, where people know that in Indianapolis, everybody cares about everybody. and that there's a constant flow, not something that it's like a church. When you start church, you don't think, well, this is going to be good for 5 years. You think it's going to be good forever. We're going to keep this going. It isn't going to be me running, it's going to be someone else after me. And Unite Indy has seen that we've had too many really successful charities working in the inner city who have gone out of business, who, they're great at what they do, but they're not great at raising money. And if we can form a foundation under them that is strong enough, we can see us all going down into the century with a really new form in our city. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do, and what every one of you are always, every day, involved in so well.
Nancy, on that note too, I think, the body of Christ really is, there's so much going on. There's small initiatives, there's small things, but people are putting their creative talents and their vocational talents to work. And if we can just get more people to come alongside them to expand their bandwidth and expand their impact, the Whiz Kids programs and Elevate in the high schools and the junior highs, and those are things that are giving vision and giving those positive role models. And I could just go on and on, where business is collaborating too with believing faith-based groups to then develop more economic development initiatives that will bring more jobs to the city itself, and also bring revenue that's going out of our state back into the state. So the city wins too.
Can I throw a monkey wrench?
Sure.
Okay.
Monkey wrench away.
Pastor, you're going to forgive me early. Okay, we can pray about it later.
You got it.
I think we have an abundance of programs. We can program the stuff out of our city, and we're good. Hey, look at all these programs. But I don't think we have a program problem.
No.
I think we have a heart problem. And I actually think the best program is God's program. And I don't think we're all with the program, if that makes some sense.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, look at the challenges we had just in transportation. Because what we don't tell the truth about in our communities and when we go back homes is, I believe everybody should have a chance, but I don't want them coming here. I don't want two-way busing. I want you to think about this. We want those folks to go to Plainfield, but don't create a line that brings them out here. Well, what's the heart in that?
Is that a situation that's actually occurring in some way?
I submit when we were going through the transportation conversation, we were hearing these things.
Okay.
And I believe our churches had an opportunity to really minister to the heart of our community. Because there are people, there are pockets, there are churches. We don't really worship together, really. We may go and visit. But we're segregated on Sundays, right?
Not at my church, but
You're not your church, but I tell you, I look and I say, oh, y'all look like me, which is cool. I get it. But I submit that that's probably one of the environments that we don't really change. We don't really drive a new kind of ministry that says, all these kids are our kids. I know I have the struggle that when I hear a shooting on the south side or on the east side, I already develop a picture. I know who did it. I do this too. I had to fight it. But if somebody kills 18 people at one time, I'd already know. I run a racial tape that says, that's not black folks. We don't kill each other like that. That's a toxin that's in us. And I submit it is throughout our community. So when we're talking about changing conditions of poor people, it's still a them. It's not a us. It's not a we. I know there's people who have great hearts, but I submit even this heroin issue is self-medication. I think we have a hurting community, and I don't know if our prayer lives are really getting to that and changing the whole atmosphere for our community. I'm not trying to bring violins out here. I just don't think we tell, as I'm challenging us all, to tell a new truth about our community. We've got great opportunities, we've got great things happening, lots of programs, but we have a heart program in Indianapolis. We have a heart problem, I'm sorry. And I would submit and flip that and say we have a heart opportunity. We really do have a chance to say when we're trying to create busing, or we're talking about bias crime, or we're talking about reproductive lives and issues and services for women. When we're talking about things, we don't always get to the full truth. And I submit we get so political that we back away. And that's a heart issue, that's a courage issue, in my opinion. It's not a program issue. So I would caution us, or at least exhort us to say, let's change that heart a little bit. Let's challenge our congregations, let's challenge our community to really embrace the full ministry of what we have, the opportunity that we have to change our whole script, not to look at these people as those and them, but own them as ours. And I think we'll change some of the heroin issue when we see that person over there, that's my son, or that's my uncle, and we take it personally.
And it's my friend. I think
Personally.
that friendship is, it has to be a one-to-one relationship. And everybody isn't going to be friends with everybody. But if we can mix it up and let people from the suburbs really know people who maybe they're in a helping situation, but they become friends. I think friendship is the very basis of it.
Just as long as we don't get into the situation that I often hear is good-meaning, good-intentioned folks come up to me oftentimes and say, Toby, you know what, you're a race relations guy. Some of my best friends are black. And I say, mine too. I'm not being confrontational in that, but I want to really invite us all to see that, relationships, I think you're right on. Relationships really do matter, but they can't be just surface. And I submit it can't be one way. No. I want the suburban churches to say we're going to work with the urban churches, not because you're trying to help them, because I bet most of them want to help you too. Because I know some urban churches be like, those poor white people out in Carmel, they have no idea. So I think it's just important that we change some of that language, not all of it, but change some of it.
No, but you're absolutely right. They have no idea, most of them. I think I lived most of my life that way. I grew up in a little town, and everybody there was white. I didn't hear about race anything until my mother told me that when she was a little girl, they moved her to Florida for a while, and she thought all the black people hated her because they would cross the street, but she was walking down the street. So she didn't understand what was going on. And I think you're absolutely right. We do need to know each other, and people from one culture need to visit the other and vice versa. I think at this time, unless anybody has another comment, I'd like to open it up to the floor. If there are any questions that anybody has there, we can pass you a microphone.
There's one in the back.
Let's see, does this work? Yes, it does.
Hopefully that's a question for Toby.
Hope not. I talk too much anyway.
How y'all doing today?
What's happening?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I have a question for David Hampton. So what do you do for, I know you heard my testimony, what do you do to your congregation to prevent an angry teen coming because of his past experience with church, which was hurt and pain and judgmental? What do you do for a teen that comes in with a mindset of mine, which is angry and wants to shoot the church? What do you do as a pastor? What does that make you think about? How does that make you feel as a pastor?
Well, we're very blessed at Light of the World. One of our most dynamic ministries, quite frankly, is our youth ministry, is our teen ministry. And we do a lot of groundwork with our teens. And as you may be aware, we hold 2 lock-ins a year. We've had as many as 3,000 teens try to come to our church for a lock-in. We had to turn half of them away, and we still hold 1,500. And we realize most of those teens are not members of our church, and that's part of the purpose of it, is to evangelize. And I have a plethora of various situations and circumstances, from young women who are pregnant to young men who are in gangs or have a criminal record, who are angry, all of that. I've dealt with all of that. And all we do is show them love. It doesn't matter who they are, where they come from. We show them the love of Christ and that there's a better way beyond your circumstances. And so we welcome that, actually. We specialize in that. And I make it a point, I can't do everything, but I make it a point to meet with our teens once a month. So I'm the monthly speaker. The first Tuesday of every month, I'm there to talk to our teens. And we deal with different topics each month, but I mostly talk about things they want to talk about. And identity comes up quite a bit. Peer pressure comes up quite a bit. Sex comes up quite a bit. Anger comes up quite a bit. And we delve into those issues. And people ask me all the time, and I'll close this out very quickly. People ask, how do you get, those teens to come? How do you do a lock-in like that? And what's the secret? And I tell them all the time, we never just do something and invite and all of those teens come just because we invited. We spend the entire year building relationships. And then those teens build relationships. I promise you, when I give the invitation on Sunday, not a week goes by that the majority of those who are actually evangelizing and reaching souls are teens. I have a teen, at least one or two, who joins our church every single Sunday. And our teens will walk them down in a big group because they are actually evangelizing. And what's really ironic, as we talk about parenting, most of the teens that attend my church, most of the youth, their parents did not. They were invited by another teen. Their parents are not Christians at all. And so my real, ulterior motive is, once we reach the teens, maybe we can then work on their parents. Because unfortunately, they're getting a lot of love in our environment, but I know when they go back home, they're going back home sometimes to very volatile and traumatic experiences. So we want to try to, seep Christ into that home as well to get the parents to come. It's rare that they do, but sometimes it happens. But my quick answer is we just show them the love of Christ, no matter who they are. Doesn't matter what they're dealing with. And some of the young people who come on Tuesday nights, we feed them. That's the only meal they get that day. And what I found out later with some of the young children, when some of our workers give them a hug, they don't get hugs. It's the only hug they get, period. And some of them are actually apprehensive. And we have to be careful. We don't know if they're being abused. We don't know what the situation is. But I do know that they'll say, wow, I've never gotten a hug. And so they become addicted to that love, and they keep coming. So we just show them love, man. That's it. We know they're angry.
Thank you, David. We have another question?
Yep. Can you guys hear me up there?
Yes.
Yeah.
My name's Sean Cook, and thank you guys for being here. I attend Soma Church, and one of the things that our pastors always talks about is, the conversation doesn't change until our dinner tables change. And for me, I think it's great that we can discuss this openly and some of the tension around, race relations here in Indianapolis. But I would love to hear from each one of you. What are maybe one or two actionable steps that each one of us in this room can take to start to change that narrative and that dialogue?
Charles, you want to start?
Well, an actionable step is to invite somebody else into your life. I hear so much fear, scared, they don't want to take the risk. And what I'm trying to do now is how do I encourage somebody? So I'm black, so a lot of white people are fearful of what I say around a black person. Am I going to offend you and stuff? And I'm like, hey, just come on. My wife is white, 43 years. I got a diverse family, but I feel a lot of fear, and I just want to invite some people. Actionable step. Let's invite you to come and let's talk and eat and get to know one another. And one of my things is you want the relationship so that ultimately you can unite together to solve problems in the community. So.
I would say try to spend time. That's how you build relationships. but be honest, and as Toby said, let it come from the heart. Be sincere in what you're doing, and try to encourage someone.
Something that we're doing is, in our neighborhood is very diverse, Black, white, Hispanic, kids being raised by their grandmas, assortment of people, but so fun and so much. I learned so much from them. So Monday nights, we invite our young friends over. We usually have a brother and a sister, or a brother and a brother, and they come for dinner, and we eat, and we do sticky situations, and we play games, and it's fun.
What are sticky situations?
Oh, it's this cool book. You read these things and you say, what would you do? What is the right thing to do? And then the answers are there. And then there are situations for kids, and they love it, and they love talking about it, and what they probably want to do, but what they know the right answer is.
That's great.
It's fun.
One of the things, it can be kind of nerve-wracking just walking up to somebody and saying, I want to, like you experienced, hey, I saw you across the room, I want to talk to you. That could be nerve-wracking. Or just walk up to somebody and say, you know what, we can develop a relationship. That's a risk. And I submit, even we can do some things before we get to that point. There's some conversations you can have with yourself. So one of the things I've kind of told people is, before you dive in, because the water is cold sometimes, it's hot sometimes, before you dive in, go ahead and now, because you have an interest, start listening to the people around you. And all of a sudden you'll start picking up, oh, they said that. I never looked at it, or I need to perhaps think about that. And then start doing some internal study, your own private study on what is race, or what's strange about the social construct. It can help me understand. Start thinking and studying on your own so you develop a degree of awareness. Because that awareness is going to help those light bulbs come on, and it'll illuminate paths. And for what I've seen, that helps people find themselves in this whole environment, and then they can find a path that feels comfortable to them. And sometimes it starts right at home, but really there's a risk, and you just kind of got to get yourself comfortable with the risk, because you'll find all of a sudden that some of your friends hold attitudes that you did have or you never pushed back on, because that's just the kind of conversation you're used to. And that's going to make you look at them differently, and perhaps look at yourself differently. So to make it easy, that may be the way, an initial way to start that process, so you get comfortable with it and comfortable in your own skin.
And I would say you mentioned the dinner table. I think you have the right idea. Yeah. We need to break bread together and have honest, authentic, organic dialogue, which will lead to honest, authentic, and organic relationships. Two of our close friends, my wife and I, we have dinner. We've had multiple dinners with Al and Kathy Hubbard. Al Hubbard is a staunch Republican, used to work in the Bush administration, but he's not trying to convert me to become a Republican. I'm not trying to convert him to see things my way. He's very white and I'm very black. But we have very rich dialogue, and we genuinely like each other because we're honest. It's just honesty. And when we can start from the basis of honesty, real relationships can be fostered, because I don't get along with every black person. we can't, right? So we can't look at relationships from the dynamic that we're just, we have to work at it. We have to be intentional. And I would say to all of us, be intentional to go out of your comfort zone, out of your culture, out of your race, to get to know somebody. I've gotten to know some wonderful Sikhs. I didn't know much about the Sikh community. I've gotten to know a lot about the Burmese community. I've learned a lot about other communities because I put myself in situations so that I can learn about them. And it's so rich for me, so rich for me. Because at the end of the day, I love just Galatians 3. There's no Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female in Christ Jesus.
Right.
And if Christ is the basis, then we can all have a conversation that will lead to a meaningful relationship.
If I could add one more thing, I think I've found another way, a couple of steps you can take, and that is to study the Bible with people. Because when you do that and you unpack meaningful verses together and you share life issues that come out of those, that are reflected in those verses, you get to know people very quickly, and you share at a heart level that it takes down all the barriers.
Yeah.
And everybody isn't, you might not start that way with kids.
Exactly.
You do what you
That's-
do with kids. You might not start that way with somebody you
start
know in
slow.
business.
Start slow.
But I've learned to deal with a number of women that we're working with, and we've become very close, very fast, because the Word of God has power.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Pastor Aaron Woodruff from the Eagle Creek Grace Bible Church on 46th Street. Talking about these issues, I'm reminded once again, when sin prevails in the world, what a mess we have to clean up. And I think of Christ in the Great Commission. Go into the world, make disciples, baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teach them to observe all that I've commanded. And one role of the church, for pastors especially, Dr. Ware, is to equip the church to do the work of the gospel. Sadly, when you look at church history and God's people, usually when God starts judging a society, it's when God's people start living in sin and look like the world. They become of the world rather than being in the world. One thing we're trying to do at our church is to reach out, and you remember when we're all red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in His sight. And somewhere along the way, we're having a very hard time figuring out how to help these people, because I believe that biblically we're not just supposed to give handouts. We do not want to create more entitlement thinking and have people, I'll say it, enslaved to the system. We want them to be empowered to live a life of what God intended them to live. And we're finding it very difficult to empower them by teaching ESL classes and then teaching them about how to go to work. And you, Pastor, you mentioned the soft skills, but we have very little resources that we find to tap into. We can tap into government resources, but they last for a month, or they last for a week, or they last for a quarter. But we see it's going to take years to help them. Where do we find the resources for this?
Well, that's part of what we want to do. I spent the last 10 years working with people with really significant resources and helping them with their giving, but my job at that point was just to help them what they wanted to do. What I'm trying to do now is enlighten people about needs that are right here in our own backyard. You know, I said something before about going on a mission trip, and I know many people who have hopped on airplanes and gone halfway around the world to do what they thought was doing good and love it, and it's great, and they're dedicated to Africa or India or wherever they go. But once again, when they live here, they drive down Meridian Street and they don't even know what's going on. So we're trying real hard to, and we have to do it one-on-one at this point, but just to get out and tell the story. And that's something everybody could be doing with everybody they know, to let them know just some of the conditions. Just on that one flap in our brochure, you'll see a number of conditions. On our website, there are more that are just deplorable conditions for people to be living in right here in our own city. And it's hard to believe with the wealth that we've got that these conditions would be here for people. But I think letting people know that when you're talking to people who, especially when Christ has already got their heart, and then they understand that there's a problem here that they didn't even realize exists before, they're open to providing support to help eliminate that. But I would agree with you. I think one thing we've all got to do is we've got to focus on helping people lift themselves up, not just giving them stuff, because that's going to be temporary at best. It's not going to be long lasting. So what we're trying to do, Russ and I and Nancy are trying to find models that are working for employment, for education, for churches, suburban churches linking arms with urban churches like we were talking about before and with schools, and then to take those to others and to say, if you're not doing anything like this now, this might be something you'd be interested in. We're trying to spread the word so that we get more and more people involved, but I think really everybody's got to go out of here and let other people know what's going on, let more people know, and just spread the word. And I think that alone will do a whole lot of good, but I don't think there's any silver bullet. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you that tomorrow somebody's going to walk in and provide all the resources you need to get done what you need to do, but I think if more people were aware of the needs, you'd find a whole lot more support. So we all need to.
I have to be the bad guy here and cut this off so that people can leave on time. However, I have one last question. Our host, Dr. Charles Ware, wrote this book, One Race, One Blood. And it's a really meaningful, heavy read. And I wanted to ask you about one thing before we all left. You said in this book, at the central core of racism, we find the sinful hearts of men living in a fallen world. This fundamental problem has no earthly cure. What does that mean to us?
Well, I think we've talked about it a number of times. The power of the gospel, Jesus Christ, changes lives. As a young kid, you could have called me racist. I didn't like white people. I didn't trust white people. I didn't want to be around white people. And I was an angry young man. When Christ came into my life, my whole world changed. I tell people I turned 180 degrees and haven't looked back. And I met white people I met a guy who was a former Klansman. I spoke somewhere and he came up and said, "Brother, I was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, but I'm saved. Let's hug." Now he was about 300 pounds. It's hard for me to get my arms around him. But that's the power of the cross and the changed heart. And I mean, that's what really motivates me above everything else, is the difference Christ has made in my life.
And that's what's going to take care of racism. So we have to keep walking toward the cross.
Amen.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here. Good evening.